In this video, I will demonstrate from beginning to end on how I engineer my artwork to break down into multiple pieces. This is a preview of the final piece that I will be using for the demonstration. I like to design my sculptures with multiple sections so that I can easily handle the work and fit them into kilns. Once they're fired, I still like to keep them in separate pieces so they remain easy to handle and to ship. It also results in making them less fragile. To do this, I often rely on brass tubes, both round and square, which you can purchase through K&S Precision Metals. You can get various sizes that slide perfectly into one another. I begin by roughing up the brass tube with a Dremel tool so that the glue will stick. I then drill a hole in my fired work using a ceramic drill bit. You can purchase these at your local hardware store, and there are several brands which all work well. The Milwaukee ones are my favorite. Once drilled, I like to make sure the hole is slightly bigger than the rod to give extra room for the glue. I'm also making sure I texture the rod in the appropriate place where it will be glued. In this case, I didn't go high enough. Next, clean out the hole, removing the dust so that the glue will stick. Then I glue with either PC7 or JB Weld. Both are very strong two-part epoxies that are mixed with a 50-50 ratio. Make sure you mix it well. Apply the glue inside the hole and on the rod. Don't be stingy with the glue. I then use tape to hold the rod into place and make sure that the rod remains plumb or level. I just use my eye. If I can add more glue to the inside of a sculpture, I always do. The great thing about PC7 is that it is a thick glue, and if you get your fingers wet, it won't stick to your skin, and you can even roll it into coils. I also like to make sure the end of the brass tube is plugged with glue whenever possible. You will need to allow the glue to sit overnight and cure. The next day, remove the tape and use the Dremel tool to cut the brass tube. It is difficult to cut the brass tube flush with the actual piece. So after cutting the tube, I then use the Dremel tool to grind down the remaining stump. I will then use a different grinding stone to clean up the opening of the hole and to expand it just a little bit at the top so that it will be easier to insert a brass tube. Once I'm satisfied, I will cover the hole with tape, trying not to tape it down too hard. And I then insert the rod to make a hole in the tape. I then set the animal into the appropriate position and then tape the tape to the underside of the animal. This will show me where I need to drill the corresponding hole into my animal. I find it easiest to start my hole with the Dremel tool. Then drill the hole with a ceramic drill bit. The hole needs to be slightly bigger than the brass tube. Now I'm preparing the brass tube that will be glued inside the animal before cutting it down to size. Again, be sure to clean both the brass tube and the hole to be free of dust so that the glue will stick. Now add glue to the inside of the animal and set aside. Then I use soap on the long brass tube that will be used to connect the two parts of the sculpture together. You don't want any glue to stick to this tube as it needs to be free floating. Then slide the short brass tube onto the long one. Sometimes I use JB Weld for gluing, sometimes I use PC7. Add more glue to the short rod as needed. Also, make sure the long tube is coated generously with soap so that no glue will stick to it. I'm now masking out the outside of the hole on the bottom portion of the sculpture to prevent any glue from the animal from sticking. I'm also adding soap to the inside of the brass tube to prevent glue running down and sticking. The only glue I want to stick is the one on the short brass tube that will be on the inside of the animal. Insert the tube to the bottom part of the sculpture with the short rod with the glue on it at the base. Make sure it's sticking out a little bit. I'm just adding a little extra soap to make sure the glue from the inside of the animal doesn't stick. Now carefully slide the animal over the brass tube, making sure it is in the exact position you want it, and allow the glue to cure overnight. The next day, remove the animal, the brass tube, and tape. Using a Dremel, I remove the excess stump of the rod that slid down during the process. Then I clean the excess rod with various Dremel bits so that it's nice and flush. I like to use a Dremel tool to clean the inside of the brass tube and to make the hole slightly bigger at the opening to make it easier for the brass tube to slide in and out. Then remove dust and touch up with paint. Lastly, insert the brass tube and slide the animal into place. Now you're done!